The following is an interview with Spike Cassidy, guitarist of DRI, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, who also has the distinction of being the producer-mixer of Acid Bath's first album When the Kite String Pops. This interview was done on 6/14/98. 1. How were you introduced to the band? Spike. They approached my record label and were talking to my partner there. He told me he was interested in signing them, and asked if I would be interested in going down there and producing the album. I agreed. 2. Where was the record done? Spike. We did the recording in a town called Metairie, just outside of New Orleans, the band's stomping grounds. I think it's best on small budget projects to spend the money on recording, rather than on airfare, hotels and expenses to keep the band alive. Like you must do when a band flies to and lives in a different city for a month while recording. The only problem was Acid Bath all lived too far away from the studio to do this. So we wound up spending valuable recording budget money on an apartment. 3. How long did it take? Spike. About a month, maybe a little less, 3 weeks or so. I just remember I needed about 3 more days than I had. But I think it's always like that. I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I'm never completely happy with the final product. I always want to do just a little more to make it better. 4. Was the band very focused? Did they take many takes, or were they pretty well rehearsed? Spike. I would have to say yes, or at least they were well rehearsed. Not too many mistakes or takes. There were some distractions, like their van broke down and had to be repaired during the recording. It was our only transportation at the time and we needed it. So I think it was Jimmy who had to take it to the shop and it wasn't available a few times we needed him to record. Things like that, yet they seemed to stay focused and take it all in stride. 5. Were there any odd setups, recording techniques used? Spike. Yes, plenty. The studio wasn't the greatest and was lacking here and there, so we improvised. I remember making a mic stand out of a milk crate cause we ran out of stands. I had Dax singing over my shoulder in the control room for tracking, because there wasn't an empty room I could put him in. That was a bit weird, trying to turn knobs and hear what it does while he's screaming in your ear. As we started to mix, I wasn't happy with the snare sound. So I took the snare track and pumped it through a stereo speaker. Duct taped the speaker to the top of the snare, face down. So every time the recorded sound played over the speaker, it popped the live snare. I recorded the new sound of the snare and speaker and flew it back into the mix. That was a first for me. Wonder if that's been done before? 6. Audie's bass had a pretty distinct sound. Was that technique, effects, or just what came out? Spike. It was mostly his sound. We had to do a little in the level matching of his different FX, but other than that it's all him. He had his sounds down to a small science in a FX processor. It worked out really good. I remember one thing we did do, on Dr. Seuss, we put his already overdriven track through a distortion pedal, and distorted it a little more. 7. Were there any songs recorded that didn't make it on the album? Spike. No, it all went as planned. There was a song or two put on the chopping block, but digital editing can work wonders. What I mean is, on 2 songs there was a certain verse or chorus that just didn't rock like the others. So, you replace them with the good ones. Everyone does it. Especially when the budget runs out, and you're left with things to fix in the mix. 8. Was there any tension or friction in the studio? Were there any problems? Spike. Well, I think there's been some sort of tension on every project I've worked on. It's normal. You got a bunch of guys who are like brothers, with different opinions. Everyone wants the recording to come out its best, but everyone's idea of what's best is slightly different. Overall then, I would say no, because nothing sticks out in my mind as abnormal. 9. What impressed you, struck you, surprised you most about the band? Spike. Dax's vocals. He's pretty diverse in range from really singing to screaming. And the overall heaviness of the band. Their power and dynamics. That's what sticks out when I look back at it. 10. Were any songs written in studio? Spike. Not that I know of. There was parts of songs. Like a line of lyrics rewritten to fit the music better. Or a couple of guitar notes that clashed a little and were rewritten at the last moment. The recording studio is a funny place. Especially for loud overdriven music. When you're rehearsing in a little practice room, with everything turned up to 10, it's hard to hear everything. Sometimes you record it and say I didn't know it went like that, or sounded like this, so you change a little something to make it sound better. 11. What kind of effects were used? Spike. The normal reverbs and delays mostly. Like I mentioned, it wasn't a luxurious studio. I think we only had 2 reverbs and 2 delay units to work with. I think we wound up using Audi's FX processor during mixing, as an extra delay unit. 12. Were the songs done live or did the band lay down each track by themselves? Spike. This is how we did it. Everyone plays live. In separate rooms, to keep the separation between tracks. What I mean is, it's no good to have the bass amp blasting into the drum mics. When you want to turn up the snare you wind up turning up the bass too. So everyone plays in their different rooms together live. What we concentrated on first is the drums. You record till you get the best possible version of drums for that one song you're working on. The drums are really hard to overdub and fix later. So once the drums are good for that song, then you listen to the bass that was recorded with it. If there is mistakes, you overdub and fix them. If the whole track is not too good, then just re-record the whole bass track over. Then move on to the guitars, listen to them, fix the mistakes. Then on to vocals, which we really didn't use much of the live track, because like I mentioned, Dax was in the control room with me for the live tracks, or scratch tracks. The sound in there wasn't too good for vocal recording. We put Dax in the little guitar room once the guitars were done. 13. What was the release date on When the Kite String Pops? ? Spike. All I can remember off the top of my head is late summer fall 1994. 14. How did the band fare touring? What were they like on the road? Spike. They were all right, I guess. It was their first tour, so they didn't know what to expect half the time. You don't make too much money on your first tour, so that's hard on a band as well. So they bumped cigarettes of us, DRI, and shared our food and beer. They had it pretty good compared to DRI's first tour. We basically got nothing. No money, no food, no beer. We sold shirts we printed ourselves and 7-inch EPs for $2, so we had gas money to get to the next show. Once we had to give blood, because we didn't sell enough merchandise to make it to the next show. 15. How many tours did DRI do with Acid Bath? Spike. We just did the one American tour together, fall 1994. 16. Are there any interesting stories you'd like to share from the road? From the studio. Spike. We traveled in different vehicles. DRI had a minivan and a rider truck. Acid Bath had a converted school bus. They painted it gray. It was like a hardcore Partridge Family bus. One morning driving to the next show we passed them up. We get to the venue, do our sound check, and still Acid Bath hasn't arrived. I think it was somewhere like Springfield. Anyway, the phone rings. It's Acid Bath. They are in Springfield, but in the wrong state. There was 2 Springfields in 2 different states, next to each other. Acid Bath's driver didn't pay close enough attention to the map, and sorry guys lol. 17. What kind of relationship did you have with the band? Spike. Well, that's something you should ask them. I would like to think of them as good friends. They have a few beefs with Rotten Records, which is my label, but I'm really a silent partner. I had nothing to do with their Acid Bath signing, or contract negotiations, or any of the business aspects of them and Rotten. Yet, they would blame me, and complain about things to me, and I really couldn't do much for them. In fact, I went out of my way and helped them a lot, but I guess they didn't realize it. I think they still consider me as part of the evil Rotten Records. 18. What were the tours like? Were they a fun band to tour with? Spike. We had a lot of good times. We partied together a lot. Overall, I thought we had a great time. I hope they feel the same. The good times definitely outweighed the bad. 19. What do you think of the band? Are you a fan? Spike. Yes, I'm a fan. I really like them as a band. I would say that once the recording started I was hooked.